Our protagonist could not contain his growing curiosity day after day about exploring the book Shams al-Ma'arif. One day, after finishing his first-year university exams, he decided to visit an old library and inquire about the book. Though he only managed to obtain a counterfeit copy, not the original, he was thrilled. He rushed home, hid the book, and waited for the right moment. About 10 days later, his family left to attend his cousin's wedding, and he pretended to feel unwell, staying behind. He had already been secretly reading the book at night, and had decided on the first spell he wanted to cast. He followed all the instructions, lighting some candles, extinguishing all the lights in the house, drawing the symbols needed for the spell, and waiting for a sign. Suddenly, he remembered the coffee he had left on the stove, and when he returned, he found that the candles had all gone out. That was the sign, though he didn't realize it yet. Moments later, his family returned, which surprised him. He asked why they hadn't gone to the wedding, wondering if something had happened. They were puzzled and asked him if he had been sleeping since they left and had just woken up. He looked at the clock and was shocked at how much time had passed without him noticing. He waited a few days, but the spirit he had summoned to serve him did not appear. Determined, he resolved to try a stronger spell, one that required sacrificing a black cat. He was concerned about finding a black cat and decided he couldn't bring himself to harm an innocent creature. Just then, the doorbell rang, and when he opened the door, a black cat was staring up at him. He felt as though it had come to him, as if it was meant to be sacrificed. He proceeded with the ritual precisely as described, sacrificing the cat and using its blood to draw symbols and incantations on the bathroom floor. He mixed some of its blood with his own and let the combined blood flow from his head down his body. Once again, he sat in silence, waiting for a sign. But just then, his family returned home, interrupting his ritual. He quickly cleaned up, erasing all traces of what he had done. That same evening, strange things began to happen. While returning home during a break from work, he saw his little sister sitting on the stairs in the dark. When he called out to her, she ran inside and he followed, shouting after her. When his father asked him why he was yelling, he told him what he'd seen, only for his father to look at him in confusion and inform him that his sister had been asleep for a long time. When he entered her room, he found her deeply asleep, wearing different clothes than those he had seen on the stairs. 3 days later, he fell into a deep sleep on the couch beside the bathroom. He felt as though black clawed hands were dragging him under the couch. Despite all his attempts to resist, he couldn't escape. When he opened his eyes, he saw her, a queen of the jinn whom he had summoned with the second ritual, and who had killed the spirit he'd summoned the first time. She demanded that he dismiss her, warning him of the danger that awaited if he didn't. But he didn't know how to dismiss her, as the book didn't mention anything like that. Terrified by her threats, he realized his curiosity might one day be the end of him. Within the same week, his mother fell into a strange condition. She stopped speaking to anyone, didn't recognize her husband or children, and stopped eating and sleeping. Despite taking her to several doctors, none of them could find a cause. They resorted to tying her hands and feet to the bed. All this time, it never occurred to the young man that these disturbances were due to his actions and his cursed black book. His mother's brother, who lived in Saudi Arabia, came to see her upon hearing of her deteriorating condition. When he saw her, he fell to the ground in shock. He immediately knew her condition was caused by jinn. An experienced spiritual healer, he immediately sensed what had happened. Grabbing his nephew, he asked him threateningly, "Where's the book?" The young man had hidden it on the roof of the house. He retrieved the book, and his uncle began his work. The first thing he did was burn the book and then start treating his sister. Gradually, the strange phenomena in the house subsided, but they continued to haunt the young man alone. He suffered in silence, unable to speak of what he saw and endured, while the jinn queen refused to leave without causing harm, especially to the young man who had bound her with a single word. Despite his uncle's efforts to protect him from the jinn, nothing worked. A month later, they found him in the bathroom, covered in blood, with the same symbols he had once drawn by hand sprawled around him. I had never believed in the existence of jinn or ghosts my entire life. I was a young man in the prime of my youth, and by God's grace, I found a bride who was like a gift from heaven to me. We were married, and all that remained for us to be together under one roof was to find a suitable home. Eventually, I found an apartment, such a beautiful apartment at an unbelievably low price. I was told it was haunted by jinn, but I thanked the jinn who occupied it for allowing me to get it at such an amazing price. The previous owner had started painting it, but supposedly stopped after witnessing frightening things at night. Since I am an engineer and aware of the quality of its construction, I insisted on buying it, renovating it, and turning it into an extraordinary home. I hired a contractor and his assistants, instructing them to work only during the day. They began executing my instructions. However, during the first week, I had a car accident that broke my arm and leg. My family advised me to leave the apartment, but I was convinced it was just fate and had nothing to do with the apartment. After I recovered, all the renovations were complete. I took my wife and went there. A heated argument broke out between us, and I suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to grab her head and slam it against the wall. I resisted this urge, but it was incredibly difficult. I left the apartment immediately, leaving my wife in a state of shock over my exaggerated reaction. I decided to stay in the apartment before moving in with her, just to reassure myself and make the right decision. I asked my close friend to stay with me to help figure things out, and from the very first night, something horrifying happened. I saw a shadow following me wherever I went in the apartment. When I told my friend, he swore he saw it too, describing it as a small child who even tried to speak to him. We never went back to that apartment. However, I decided to look into its history. I discovered it belonged to the brother of a neighbor who lived above it. When I spoke to him, he shared its unsettling past. When the building was first constructed, it was a large 7-story building with only one apartment on each floor. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. One day, while an electrician was finishing his work there, he was electrocuted and died on the spot. All the floors were sold except for the 3rd floor, where the landlord moved in. Later, his young son died from gas inhalation in the apartment's bathroom. The landlord became resentful and superstitious about the apartment and decided to sell it. It was then bought by the father of a student at a nearby university. Tragedy struck again when the student invited 3 of his friends over, one of whom was a police academy student carrying his personal gun. They began joking around, and one of them grabbed the gun to tease his friends, thinking the magazine was empty. However, he forgot to check the chamber, and a bullet fired accidentally, killing his friend in front of everyone. The student who fired the shot fell into a severe depression, especially since he kept seeing his friend everywhere in the apartment. He dropped out of university and his life fell apart. He even attempted suicide in the apartment, but his father rescued him in time. The father took him away and put the apartment up for sale, eventually selling it to a man who worked in the Gulf region. This man left it closed and unoccupied, but the neighbors and the building's caretaker reported seeing the door and windows opening at night and hearing noises as if people were living inside. They contacted the owner, who agreed to have someone come and recite the Quran there from time to time, hoping it would bring peace to the building. When the owner heard about the strange occurrences, he decided to sell the apartment at a very low price, and you ended up buying it, even though you knew it was allegedly haunted. I told him that I didn't believe in jinn until I saw them with my own eyes. Now the vision was clear as daylight. I almost killed my beloved wife because of the jinn inhabiting the apartment. I decided to abandon it without selling it so that no one else would suffer from it. Even though I didn't live in it and would never live in it, I constantly dreamed of being there, chased by the jinn, who relentlessly tried to end my life. So I called upon a sheikh and an imam, who insisted on expelling all the jinn from the apartment. Indeed, they succeeded, but I still never moved in.